Hi, and welcome back to JKernifer Astrology. My name is Jenny, and I transform lives through the mediums of tarot and astrology. I will be opening myself up to personal readings for parts of June and July, so look in the description box below for more information. The Gemini New Moon 2024 occurs on Thursday, June 6th at 8:37 AM Eastern Standard Time, inviting us to cultivate curiosity, embrace diversity, develop adaptability, and navigate the at times polar opposite paradoxes of life with an open and inquisitive mind. The new moon is when the moon disappears from our Earth-based perspective for 3 days. It is not visible at this phase because when the sun and moon align at the same exact degree point of the zodiac, or point in the sky or universe, in the new moon phase, the moon comes between the Earth and the sun, and is therefore unable to reflect the sun's light back to us from this position. The sun and moon aligned at the same exact degree point of the zodiac, with the sun representing who we were born to be and the moon representing who we already are on a deep private level, is a divine alignment of energy that makes new moons ideal for manifestation and for setting new intentions. The new moon and the 2 weeks that follow provide opportunities for new beginnings and to begin anew. You may notice themes of experimentation, taking spontaneous action or initiation on something, and movement. In the sign of Gemini, we'll be presented with opportunities to strengthen our adaptability and versatility, improve our listening and communication skills with the influence of Mercury, and gain greater awareness around the power of our thoughts and our overall mindset to create our 3D reality, our ability to manifest, and our ability to receive abundance. Factoring in that this is the second of two back-to-back new moons featuring conjunctions to Venus, with this Gemini new moon featuring a conjunction to Venus while Venus is Cazimi, the new beginnings that we're manifesting and experiencing over the next 2 weeks and 6 months. I'll have to come back later and plug the corresponding full moon 6 months later here as an end card, but this will be the full moon in Gemini 2024. We'll see themes of enhanced learning and communication and heart-centered communication, or we'll be receiving messages from the heart. Gemini Energy. I am someone who identifies as having a lot of Gemini energy. I have my natal Moon, Mars, and Vesta in the early degrees of Gemini, and I have multiple placements in the 3rd house, home to Gemini energy, including Uranus, giving me the aura of a Gemini. You'll also notice that Mercury is highly aspected in my chart. It is the second most aspected planet in my chart after Venus, my chart ruler, as a Libra rising. Mercury is rising in my 12th house, along with my chart ruler Venus and the sun in the 1st. This makes Mercury just as significant as Venus, my chart ruler, giving a nice blend of Libra, Leo, and Gemini to my energy. I am Gemini. Curiosity is my name. I am into everything, and I know everyone. My mind moves at the speed of light. I get more done in a day than most people do in a month. Maybe that's why I'm considered to be two people. Night and day, extroverted and thoughtful, duality, dynamics, every pot on the stove set to boil. I am the most exciting guest at the dinner party, if you can keep me there long enough to complete the meal. This is a quote by Andy Nathanson, author and astrologer. Gemini is a mutable or adaptable air sign, known for its intelligence, versatility, and high sociability. The element air has connections to logic, intellect, communication, speech, thought, and writing. In stark contrast to the preceding sign, Taurus's stubborn resistance to change, Gemini is the most adaptable or changeable sign in the zodiac. Where Taurus tends to be more reserved and introverted, Gemini tends to be more extroverted. Gemini can be thought of as shapeshifters who are often restless in nature. Another stark contrast to preceding sign Taurus's steady, grounded, present energy. Currently, the sun casts a spotlight of energy on the constellation Gemini through what's more commonly known as Gemini season, creating an emphasis on a collective desire for change, variety, and freedom. This new moon will inspire us to remain open to miracles, surprises, experiences, and opportunities. Be sure to look for blessings in disguise. At the very least, we'll see our existing circumstances or current environment with a fresh perspective, and we'll learn to welcome change with an open heart and an open mind. We'll also experiment with how making minor adjustments to our mindset can impact our experiences. The pictograph, or glyph for Gemini, represents the mirroring figures of the twins, Castor and Pollux. This is associated with duality, twins, siblings, versatility, and communication. Duality can include shadow and dark, but the point is not to focus on the duality itself, but instead on the power that comes from bridging the gap and balancing two seemingly opposing forces together, such as healing shadow with light, or finding the way out of pain by navigating through it. Have you ever wondered why Gemini is the most notoriously disliked sign in the zodiac? Well, it's not Gemini. I hate to break it to you. It's because Gemini is a mirror. It's an air sign. Gemini and Libra especially are mirrors. They reflect back to us. Particularly Gemini, the shadow, the parts of self we may not be quite ready to see. And it's those reflections of things within us that upset us or trigger us and make us dislike Gemini. Let me say it before and I will say it again. Shadow work is important. While we may allow our shadow to sit beside us in the passenger seat, we must not allow it to drive, at least not for long. The glyph also represents the lungs and the human arms, two parts of the body that Gemini and Mercury rule. The two parallel lines represent knowledge, wisdom, and learning, while the top and bottom line represent the ability of the human mind to synthesize and organize information. According to Greek mythology, the immortal Pollux grieved the loss of his brother Castor, his mortal brother Castor. So their father, and honestly, everyone's father, or so it seems in Greek mythology, Zeus, united them again in the heavens as the constellation Gemini. In the night sky, they are said to carry a lute, a bow and arrow, and a club, symbols of the creative, yet competitive, and at times combative, especially verbally combative, attributes of Gemini. Did someone say sibling rivalry? Interestingly enough, Gemini and the third house of one's astrological, natal, or birth chart represent the phase of life from late childhood to early adulthood, usually up until our first Saturn return. That onset hits us usually between the ages of 27 and 32, depending on the sign. This is a time in our lives when we're still discovering our interests and our identities. While we're making connections, we're not necessarily forging deep emotional bonds or long-term commitments. Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, represented by Hermes in Greek mythology, the ancient messenger of the gods responsible for periodically delivering messages to and from the gods in Mount Olympus and Hades in the underworld. As such, Mercury serves to bridge between two opposing forces. Mercury is the only planet that is gender neutral, not considered to be exclusively feminine or masculine in nature, but is instead objective and fluid, able to shapeshift between both energies. Mercury as a planet is subject to rapid, often unpredictable changes, so it's not surprising that it rules over two mutable signs, Gemini, representing mutable air, and Virgo, representing mutable earth. Mutable signs occur or fall when there's a need to adapt or change seasons, while cardinal signs initiate seasons, and fixed signs occur in the heart of their season, or see that through to completion. Gemini season, therefore, correlates with the time period annually when spring becomes summer. In mundane astrology, Mercury represents the lower mind and its functions, the processes involved in thought, communication, learning, and speaking. This means that while the sun is in Gemini for Gemini season, the spotlight goes onto our relationship with our logical minds, our perception of reality, our overall thought patterns, the way we speak to ourselves and others, and how effectively we communicate. We'll be paying careful attention to how we unconsciously limit ourselves through our own mindset, which, when left on autopilot, falls into patterns of self-sabotage. In the sign of the twins, we'll be reflecting on our own relationship with polarities and extremes. Success versus failure, bad versus good, light versus shadow or dark, black versus white, etc. The mind must be both engaged and stimulated in order for a Gemini's heart to follow. This is especially true in the second decan, the second third of Gemini, the territory from 10 degrees to 19 degrees of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, but sub-ruled by the planet Venus, bestowing a strong Libra and Taurus underflavor to the Gemini energy. This is where the Sun, Moon, and Venus align under the Gemini New Moon, 16 degrees Gemini, under the second decan. 16 degrees in degree astrology is a Cancer degree, associated with home, family, especially mother, and energy passed through our maternal lineage or how we're nurtured. Emotional security. It can also have to do with real estate, our property. Let's explore the aspects to the new moon. The sun and moon aligned 16 degrees, 17 minutes Gemini form the focal point of a massive 5-planet stellium in the constellation of Gemini, with the moon, sun, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter. The energy of Gemini is guiding us to ruling planet Mercury, our thought, learning, and communication patterns. How do we transcend reactivity, especially in our thought and communication patterns, as we ease into greater maturity and wisdom? We have the new moon conjunct Venus. Venus Cazimi. Venus is the planetary subruler after Mercury for this second decan of Gemini. This emphasizes a collective need for harmony, security, stability, peace, pleasure, love, and connection. It's highlighting things that need to be addressed or resolved in our relationships, finances, and communications. Venus represents divine feminine, or yin, energy, Empress energy. At this time, Venus is still not present from view from our Earth-based perspective. This is due to her superior conjunction to the Sun. She will not be visible again until after July 10th, once Venus travels far enough outside of conjunction territory and begins to outpace the Sun, and she's reborn, wiser. Until then, the Sun and Venus dance together, experiencing several exact conjunctions in early June. Whenever a planet is conjunct the Sun, it's said to be combust or burnt out. The Sun burns the planet out, depleting it so much that it's completely reborn, like the phoenix rising from its ashes. This is called a Cazimi, which is Arabic for rebirth. In the past year, symbolized by the recent Venus-Jupiter conjunction 29 degrees Taurus, under the Sagittarius full moon on May 23rd, 2024. I'll link the video here and in the description box below for those of you who missed it and would like to catch up. Venus underwent a massive transformation, which is a huge symbolic leveling up for the divine feminine collective and anyone who is Venus ruled. I'm talking especially to my Taurus and Libra rising friends, but also prominent Libra and Taurus placements, and those of you who have Venus highly aspected in your chart. Rewind back to summer 2023 as I paint the scene for you. Barbie had just hit the stage, just in time for Venus's first retrograde to begin and end in the sign of Leo since the 1700s. Specifically, her retrograde through Leo covered the territory of 28 degrees Leo, the location of fixed star Regulus, the heart of the Leo constellation, symbolizing fame, fortune, and royalty, all the way back to 12 degrees Leo. During her retrograde period, Venus faced an inferior conjunction to the Sun, birthing a new cycle for Sun-dominant people and Leo placements. Skipping ahead to more recent astrological history, Venus was not only featured in a conjunction in 2 back-to-back new moons this spring, she was the planetary ruler for the first new moon, the Taurus new moon, and for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, kickstarting a new 14-year cycle, affecting the global economy, specifically our money, banks, the job market, resources, food, and security. An exact conjunction with the Venus Cazimi is a rare occurrence with the new moon. We're setting new intentions and experiencing new beginnings, revolving around beauty, love, harmony, peace, stability, security, creativity, and relationships. This is a return to Venus retrograde through Gemini in 2020. This was from May 13th, 2020 until June 25th, 2020. From 21 degrees, 50 minutes Gemini, so 21.5 degrees of Gemini, to 5 degrees Gemini, with the spotlight on June 3rd, 4th, and the days following, when Venus was Cazimi. This would have been the only time in the Venus retrograde to meet or start something, which maybe the timing wasn't right then, but there's something about this time period that's coming back around for a revamping. Things that were seeded at this time in late May and early June of 2020 are coming back around for a revamping and a revisiting. You've heard astrologers say that 2024 is a repeat of 2020. And this is yet another example of the karma the year of the wood dragon has in store. Remember, we also have the South Node, our collective karmic patterns in Libra, karmic relationships. Venus retrograde is when matters of love, heart, or wallet go awry. This Venus retrograde in 2020, from 21.5 degrees Gemini to 5 degrees Gemini, activated my little Gemini party here. Vesta, Moon, Mars, in Gemini by exact conjunction to first my Mars and then my Moon. This was the time in my life when I experienced my very first job layoff, like many of you watching, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I had been working in the international travel industry for an American tour operating company, and guess what my territory was? Italy. Our entire department, aside from a handful of lesser cost employees, was laid off. At the time, instead of waiting it out, like perhaps a more patient non-Gemini person, I started applying to jobs as quickly as possible. As soon as that April and May. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that one of the only places hiring was the Army National Guard. And I became tempted by an ad recruiting people. Long story short, a part of me had always idealized serving my country, and I decided to give the testing a try. After landing a perfect score on the ASVAB, my recruiter recommended me for the FBI's D-Lab. The Defense Language Aptitude Battery is essentially a standardized government test. It was designed by the FBI. It takes approximately 2 hours, and it's used to assess a person's ability to naturally learn a language. And this is usually for armed service workers. So the D-Lab measures learning potential, not what is already learned, so it's hard to study for. So in the test, essentially, they give you a gibberish language and a set of rules to follow. The key is to study and memorize the grammatical rules and apply them to the gibberish language and do the best that you can through the test. This was literally perfect for Gemini, Vesta, Moon, and Mars. And at the time they were recruiting people for linguistics roles, we'll just say. Although I don't know my score, I know that I scored high enough to choose between Russian or Arabic. I would take 3 trips to Fort Dix before setting a final swear-in date. But unfortunately, I would tear my hamstring while training for boot camp. So while I was bored at home nursing a partially torn hamstring in April, May 2020, with the world shut down due to COVID-19, I downloaded Bumble. It manifested what was initially supposed to be just a fun summer fling with a younger man. But this younger guy turned out to be my karmic twin flame, sent to prepare me to face my shadow and to continue the next half of my dark night of the soul / Saturn return, which hit me late 2017, early 2018, and lasted well into late 2022, maybe even early 2023. Rewind back to 2020, this was a time of COVID-19 lockdowns and pandemic mania, which made Venus retrograde and dating particularly challenging. We were swayed by lockdown loneliness. Some of us settled for less than we deserved out of a perceived lack of alternative options. Funny enough, I actually just crossed paths with mine not too long ago. He appeared one day, not too long ago, a couple months back, at my new place of employment, the day after I had told someone the story for the first time in a while. And more recently, just a few days ago, we crossed paths near where we live on the road, which isn't terribly synchronistic because we live within a mile of one another. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. Anyway, I can feel him coming. This time, it's on a motorcycle that revs by, vroom vroom, just as it's passing me in my bright blue convertible with the top down. And the music just loud enough so that you can't hear me singing. He wasn't wearing a helmet, which is surprising to me when his favorite excuse for shitty behavior and an inability to commit was his 8 or 9, couldn't quite get that straight, concussions from playing collegiate rugby, allegedly. And never apologized for intentionally using, degrading, and discarding me after 9 months of putting me through hot and cold, on again, off again, mental gymnastics. Anyway, the point of this mildly related anecdote about my twin, my karmic twin flame, is that sometimes people come into our lives simply to wake us up. They wake us up to our full potential by forcing us to find personal empowerment. Sometimes that's their only purpose. Rejections, delays, and obstacles are more often blessings in disguise. We need only shift our perspective as the universe redirects us. Whether it's a romantic or platonic connection, if a person cares about you and they're interested in you, they will reply to your text. If they see a future with you, they make plans in advance. They introduce you to their friends and their family. If they are keeping you a secret, they are very likely using you and or have some shame around you not being good enough. That is a them problem. If they are capable of feeling remorse, empathy, or even at the least guilt and are sorry, they apologize. Allow their lack of apology to be all the validation you need to prove you were right in doubting their character in the first place. So we're still back setting the scene in 2020. Gyms were closing and reopening only to shut down again left and right, which is one of the most common ways young people meet. Many couples were suddenly forced to spend all of this time together, 24/7, often in tight quarters, magnifying incompatibilities. Venus retrograde through Gemini 2020 brought multiple can we talk regrounding moments in existing and budding relationships alike. Venus retrograde in Gemini, with Gemini being Mercury ruled, presents much like a Mercury retrograde. It's a great opportunity to deepen our existing relationships and bonds by listening actively and talking through misunderstandings and challenges that arise logically. Venus retrograde and South Node in Libra alike bring a resurgence of exes and former lovers, the arrival of a muse. In Gemini, this can indicate double trouble or a need to choose between 2 options. Global turmoil and lockdown loneliness reminded us of our own imminent mortality, which can be what drives many of us to seek forgiveness. 2020, this time, brought the added pressure of ex-flames resurfacing for reconciliation or rekindling, challenging existing connections. We have a multi-planet square to Saturn. The square is from Saturn 18 degrees Pisces to Venus, Moon, and Sun, 16 degrees Gemini. 18 degrees in degree astrology is associated with chronic illness, and Saturn here indicates illness flared up by patterns of avoidance through working too much. I have my natal Saturn 18 degrees Capricorn, where Saturn is strong in its sign of rulership or domicile. So I know this karmic pattern all too well. It's all about work-life balance. In Pisces, watch for ingredients, chemicals, possibly toxins in the things that we consume, but especially our food and our drink, and especially addictive substances, or things we're dependent upon. In Gemini, we can factor in the media and information. This can mean reading material or any music that we're listening to or consuming, and how it may impact our mood and our mindset. On a collective level, this could indicate that we're facing restrictions or limitations to our freedom of speech and self-expression. I finally got around to reading 1984 by George Orwell this year, and I highly recommend reading it or rereading it if you haven't done so already, because concepts like the thought police, compared with modern tech smart devices in nearly every home in 2024, is truly something remarkable. The new moon conjunct Venus Cazimi square Saturn represents the dichotomy between expansion and restriction, expansion and contraction. When we encounter obstacles on our path, sometimes we can allow that to dampen our perspective, that positive outlook on progress. Good things come to those with patience, self-discipline, and vision, who put in consistent effort over time. Collectively, we're learning to set boundaries, Saturn, in communication, Gemini. This can include the thoughts that we entertain or feed with energy. Later, when each of these planets square Neptune, we'll have an opportunity to dissolve patterns of escapism and addiction. Saturn is an important planet for the month of June. This is because it's the only planet to change its motion in the month of June, and because it's the planetary ruler for the back-to-back Capricorn full moons on June 21st and July 21st, the first and last days of Cancer season, respectively. Aspects to ruling planet Mercury. Mercury, like we said, is in one of its signs of rulership in Gemini. It's co-present with Jupiter and the Gemini New Moon, Venus Cazimi. I won't dive into too much detail with Jupiter and Gemini because I plan to put out a separate video, but let's discuss Mercury conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter expands Mercury's influence in this position. This expands our need collectively for socializing, communicating, networking, connecting, and traveling. You might get an itch for a quick getaway or a quick trip. In the early degrees of Gemini, we're in the process of picking a book to commit to reading, but we maybe haven't started reading the book yet. We might be organizing our ideas into manageable to-do lists before those ideas fly away. And we're still practicing everything Jupiter just taught us about embodying Taurus's presence, confidence, patience, pragmaticism, stability, and groundedness over the past 12 months while Jupiter was in Taurus. I won't get too detailed about Jupiter and Gemini because I have another video dedicated to that, which I'll have linked here as an end card, in the description box below, and in the Gemini New Moon 2024 playlist. So we have Mercury and Jupiter conjunct while they're trine to Pluto in Aquarius. This brings deep insights and information that leads to social progress unfolding over the next 20 years, while Pluto progresses through Aquarius. This can bring an intense, sudden, or surprise message, a truth, or a revelation. Words have the power to transform. Words have the power to provide forgiveness. Pluto here can intensify travel plans and short trips. So for us personally, Gemini season is when our schedules get incredibly busy overnight. It's when our social calendars go from homebodying it up and working on the garden during Taurus season to out of nowhere juggling multiple Memorial Day and birthday party invitations from Memorial Day to the 4th of July. This is why I try to host Memorial Day and 4th of July to maximize that time at home with the dogs for Taurus and Cancer season. Gemini season is also when we travel short distance for short duration to Nashville for CMA Fest, a music festival. And then a few weeks afterward, we go to a more local festival at the beach. Pluto here trine Jupiter and Mercury can bring a huge boom to journalism and independent media. The biggest Supreme Court cases always seem to fall in the month of June, sometimes carrying over into early July. And this year we'll have many headliners coming. There will be multiple Supreme Court rulings coming up involving the opioid crisis, just as the pharmaceutical companies, the big pharma giants, are facing their Neptune and Saturn return, and access to one of the most common forms of inducing an abortion orally. Depending on how the Supreme Court decides in those rulings, there could be widespread repercussions. So additionally, at the time of writing the script and filming, the Supreme Court had just decided to allow the NRA free speech lawsuit to proceed. Allegedly, the New York financial regulator pressured banks and insurance companies to stop doing business with the NRA because of their advocacy for an opposing viewpoint. This violates the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. The NRA is suing because they were signaled out because of their viewpoint. The lower court originally viewed no. The NRA appealed that. Then the Supreme Court unanimously decided to overturn that decision. While the government is permitted to limit speech, it cannot select one in favor of another opposing viewpoint to back. It's not legal, and even worse, it's not constitutional. Even if you completely disagree with their viewpoint, they are entitled to express it. This is important for several reasons, but But despite Gemini season, this polarity we're seeing, this extreme difference throughout America, it's nice to see that our elected court of elders, whom we trust to make such important decisions, are unified unanimously. Pluto trine Jupiter and Mercury can also bring intense communication or an intense conversation that has the power to transform a relationship or connection. We may also see exposure of use of manipulative communication and manipulative media. The Sabian symbol associated with the 2024 Gemini New Moon rounds to 17 degrees Gemini, which is related to maturation. The Sabian symbols, A Screen of Prophecy by Diana E. Roche, or Roche. Page 108. We'll be rounding up to 17 degrees Gemini. The head of health dissolved into the head of mentality, development. Theme, maturation. This symbol speaks to the process of maturation, or growth, from youthful self-involvement to the development of a social conscience. The image of the head of health, dissolved into the head of mentality, suggests spiritual growth, self-awareness, and the ability to see the world through the eyes of others. This degree also implies that physical and mental well-being are the result of a well-rounded and very practical grounding in that everyday world of fact. Positive, at its highest, the symbol represents self-integration, broad vision, and wisdom. On the negative, it can indicate Peter Pan syndrome, or an obsession with youthfulness, and a simple refusal to grow up. Today, the accent is on maturity and expansion of consciousness. It's time to put selfish concerns aside and focus on the welfare of the whole. Opportunity. Your greatest advantage lies in looking to the future and to what you can expect to experience if you continue in your present direction or course of action. Risk. Guard against relying on others to take care of your needs or handle your responsibilities. Don't get caught unprepared. Stepping stones. Maturation, adulthood, development, growth, evolution, completeness, wholeness, well-roundedness, self-integration, well-being, and wisdom. How to work with the Gemini New Moon. This Gemini season is the most Gemini of a season we've seen in the past 12 years since Jupiter was last in Gemini. Jupiter expands the energy and influence of Gemini, and Mercury, being in Gemini, in rulership, is further strengthening this energy and influence. This is expanding the chaos. I've been saying since the beginning, it feels a bit like a Mercury retrograde. I don't know if that's because I have some significant Gemini placements and energy, but my goodness, misunderstandings have been a theme the past few weeks, and we'll just skirt right on past that. Jupiter is expanding the energy. It's expanding the chaos, especially trine Pluto, which intensifies. It's expanding our curiosity, our need for variety, for change, along with the diversions and distractions. Many of us are experiencing too many irons in the fire, or realizing that Gemini has a tendency to verbally commit to things when they're feeling good, but then when they realize that they only have so much energy and that eventually runs out, they then end up overpromising and under-delivering because they've spread themselves too thin. So this is something to watch for with Gemini energy. Jupiter in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius. There are options galore, and it's up to us to be decisive and choose one. This is all about journalism, seeking truth, and the power of instant sharing of information and data, and even things like social media. All of this Gemini energy is a lot of mental energy, and Gemini energy in shadow can struggle with ADHD. So you may want to ditch the caffeine and the stimulants, if not for Gemini season, for the next 12 months while Jupiter's in Gemini. First, align yourself with divine feminine energy. Feminine energy is not exclusive to those who identify as female, but is part of the yin, or attracting, energy that exists within each of our souls. Meditation and breath work are highly recommended. Anything that integrates use of the element air. Breath work is getting into a state of relaxation or meditation through rhythmic breathing. Air. Verbal affirmations, written or spoken, can be incredibly powerful, especially under the Gemini New Moon. Listening to subliminals. You can also use sound, the element air, music, binaural beats, uplifting frequencies, solfeggio frequencies, lo-fi waves, and gamma or theta, alpha, beta, etc. frequencies. You can write things out as lists, as in like a to-do list, and you can create vision boards. Since this Gemini New Moon highly involves Venus, featuring the Venus Cazimi, we'll need to honor Venus as well. Your home is a temple, and so is your body. So regularly clear out dust, symbolic of karma. Weed through clutter, donate or trash items that no longer serve you. You can invoke beauty by bringing in decor that you find beautiful, or simply rearranging your existing furniture. You can keep a constant supply of fresh fruit and flowers to honor Venus. We mentioned your body is a temple. Be mindful of what you consume, down to the ingredients, chemicals, toxins that you ingest and put on your dermis, the biggest organ in your body. Because it's Gemini season, also pay attention to any negative messages, lyrics, frequencies that you might be subconsciously consuming. And you have the power to change or make a pivot around things that aren't working.